welcome to Module 10. So this module is actually taught at the beginning of the semester, but if you decided to wait till the end, then I guess this is your last module. So we'll just move on from here. This is on Geomatics team skills. And again, just like the first module, this particular module um, is really about working in groups. It's the soft skill side of geomatics, and it also is going to help you with your courses, right? When you have to work in partners, when you have to work in groups, you need to be able to work with them. And something that we found over the years is that this is just not taught. Like in school, they stick you in groups and say, do your work. Well, that really doesn't help a lot. So what we're trying to do here is give you an opportunity to learn how to work in groups and how to associate with the work and with the people and how do you manage conflict and all of that. In fact, you in the stuff that I'm going to teach you in this module, some of it obviously is just more like straightforward, but some of it is like $800 courses. If your boss were to say to you, you need to go take a conflict resolution course, that's an $800 course. So what I'm going to teach you here is basically what I have learned because I've taken a certificate in well, not conflict resolution, but I've taken one of those. But I've also taken a certificate at the university about like basically soft skill working with people in general. So I suggest that you pay attention. I know that a lot of people think, oh, I know all this, but there is some tidbits of information in here that you can also come back to your boss in the future and say, hey, look, I learned this in the class. This is how I approached it. This is how I'm going to work with this, and so forth. All right, so the first thing that we're going to cover is identifying roles and expectations in work groups. So the first thing is figuring out roles. This is what are you doing? A role is usually associated with the tasks that you are going to be completing. And so a lot of this is like there's some real like technical words, right? There's note takers, editors, communicators, engineers, instructors, equipment managers, schedulers, timekeepers, planners, project managers, choreographers, and on and on and on and on, right? So there are the names of the job that you do, like for example, a choreographer, but then there is also the role that you are. So, are you a lead choreographer, which means that you are in the world of dance, you are the person really like overseeing all the parts together. You might have the group choreographers, like little groups, and then the lead choreographer puts everybody together. So um, that's just kind of an example. And in that case, like for example, in your guys' case, you might have a project manager, a crew chief, and a survey assistant. And that's a group. That's a group that you're going to be working in. That's a team of people that you are trying to complete a project with. So if you are a survey assistant, what are your jobs as a survey assistant? Well, often it is the work, like kind of the heavier work that's out in the field. You're going to be digging holes, you're going to be pounding in stakes, you're going to be pounding in pins, you're going to be walking around with the GPS unit and taking measurements. Like there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. Then in your crew chief, the crew chief has to be able to be that mediator between the project manager and the survey assistant. And so the crew chief kind of helps the survey assistant and leads them through everything, communicates with them in a good way so that they know what they're supposed to be doing. And often that crew chief ends up dealing with some of the clients like on the site, right? So that your guys' role is probably in sooner rather than later going to be a crew chief if you are working in the surveying industry. So you now have to deal with clients, you now have to deal with upset people, you now have to deal with all of that. So there's a lot that goes into what is your role. And the project manager, maybe that's your end game. You're like, hey, you know what? I'm going to go through all of this and I'm going to be a project manager and I'm going to work with the clients and help develop projects and like do that. And that's awesome. As a project manager, you end up dealing with even more people because now you've got the drafter, you've got the equipment manager, you've got perhaps the Alberta Land Surveyor if you're not the Alberta Land Surveyor. You might have human resources, you have IT. All of that is like the project managers people. So as you kind of move up the ladder, you have more and more people to work with. So those different roles in groups are very well spread out. So there's always expectations. So in my class, in my video, I provide you with some expectations of what I want from you. So in my case, you guys are my team, right? We are a team. We are learning this material together. Like, I mean, I do know it, but sometimes you guys have some really good input and I learned something new. Everybody comes from a different background. Everybody comes from different cultures. So perspectives to be brought into what I do here is really, really important to me. So, and that's actually my expectation is that if you see something in a different way, please share that. And if I don't agree with it or if it is incorrect, based on fact, I will and evidence, I will help guide you in another way. Like obviously if you say to me, well, 1 + 1 is really 3, then my expectation is that you're going to be open-minded enough to see that it is not, right? So, so there's those kinds of things. But if you're working in a group, like for example, you're out in the field with your survey assistant, what is your expectation of the survey assistant? Is probably that they're not standing around on their cell phone playing games because they're supposed to be listening to you and talking to you, communicating, like watching hand signals and doing all of that. Your expectation is that they're up in the morning and showing up to work. Your expectation is that they're not screaming and yelling at you and throwing hissy fits all the time. Perhaps if you're a female crew chief, your expectation is that they are going to treat you as an equal, right? Um, I have worked with people in the past, and it's not so bad now, but I have worked with people in the past that didn't like the fact that women were in the field. So my expectation is that I'm treated just like they would treat any other man, because I'm fairly capable of doing, and I'm fully capable of doing everything that any other guy can do, or any man can do, I guess. I tend to use the word guy a lot, but anyway, so the expectation can be for the individual or it can be for the whole group. So even if you are working in a group of 4, your expectation for the group might be that they complete their work on time. And so, I mean, these are lots of examples. Usually what you would do is set out these expectations right at the beginning of the year or beginning of the project or beginning of like whatever you're doing that day. So some examples are completing work in timely manner, being at meetings, and if you can't be at all the meetings, let them know that you can't make it. Setting boundaries. This is one thing that a lot of people forget. And this is this is so important, is setting boundaries about the type of work you will do. And that is because if, for example, you're out in the field and there's a wasp nest right beside the area that you need to go, and you are deadly allergic to wasps' bites and stings, it's probably not the work that you feel safe doing. So that is setting a boundary, saying, I don't feel safe working in that area. I cannot work there because if I get stung, I don't have, like, my EpiPen can only do so much, right? So that is setting a boundary. There's also boundaries such as your project manager calls you up and says, hey, we need you to go over to this project and I need you to do this work on this project. You've never done it before. And the project manager is not aware of that. So when you respond, you're like, I know I'm really close to this area, but I have not done this work before. And I am concerned that I'm going to end up making an error because I'm not sure exactly how to approach this project. So that is also setting a boundary. Now your expectation with the project manager is either he's going to walk you through it or that he's either going to walk you through it or he's going to find somebody else to do it. Also setting weekly reports, like in case sometimes you don't have to do that, but sometimes you do. Send in weekly reports. I want to know how you're doing. An example is this past summer, SAIT had said to us that we need to submit our weekly, or like not weekly, but every other week we need to go into the computer system and say, yes, I've been on vacation. And they said you can do it like plus minus a few days, like they were very flexible about it, but that was their expectation. You know what? It takes me 2 minutes to do that. It's not going to cause me any grief whatsoever to send in a biweekly report that yes, I'm on vacation. So that's fine. And then another example is ensuring the work is evenly distributed. Now, this is more of the lead, the team leads group or job. So if they see that somebody's doing all the work and somebody's like really getting away with almost doing nothing, that team lead has to step in and say, hey, look, you are doing too much, you are doing too little. You guys need to share your work. I know your strengths may not be there, but so the setting the boundaries and ensuring work is evenly distributed, that's a balancing act, right? So it's making sure you've done that. Another example might be providing feedback for all work and behavior, right? So if you go out and you're talking to your survey assistant, and you're like, you know what, I really like what you did out there. The one thing I want to do is change this, right? So there's that feedback component. So I believe I talk about that, and so giving and receiving feedback is really important and being able to accept it. There are ways to do feedback with certain people, and that is also a challenge sometimes because some people don't take feedback as well if it's presented in a certain way. So that is, and that's an expectation that that person says, hey, look, I need this kind of feedback in this particular way. If they are able to do that, then you know that you're going to be able to provide them more critical feedback and they'll be more willing to listen. But the expectation is that they are open about that. Maybe if they've never received bad feedback. It's possible. So they don't know how they would react. So you're like, okay, I need to give you some critical feedback on this. Do you mind if I do it in this way? And that helps them. So going into 10.2, demonstrate work skills in different roles. So obviously we are doing stuff online. It's not going to be stuff in person. So when I set you up in a group, suddenly now you guys have to work together, right? And I know that they're just like small activities like answering questions and discussing things and so forth. But if one person's giving 2-word answers and another person is writing tons of paragraphs, then somebody needs to kind of step in and say, hey, look, like this person's not really contributing. We would really like to hear your input, your information that you found. So I do want you guys to ensure that. So because it's a little bit different, and the one thing, the theoretical side of this is it's unlikely that you're going to be in the same role all the time. And in my class, I'm going to mix you guys up in your groups every once in a while. Or I have been, if you're getting this at the end of the semester, I've been mixing you up. And also when you're in industry, right? So I remember, this is just a funny example, but I walked into work one day and I was supposed to be working in the office. So I dressed in office clothing. And I always had my steel toes with me, my steel-toed boots with me so I could work out in the field if I needed to, but I was in a dress, like a summer dress. And I walked into the office and I was started setting up jobs because I usually got there before the crews, and that was part of my work anyways. So I would set up all the jobs for everybody, make sure everything's laid out, and then when the crews started coming in, then everything was ready to go for them. Well, we ended up with a survey assistant that called in sick that day, and so they're like, Karina, we need you to go out. And I was like, I am not dressed to go out. Like, I mean, I bring my steel toes, but I can't wear this dress in the field. Like, this is not going to work. Because I did have high heels on too with it. And I'm like, this is not going to work. And so anyways, the guys, bless their hearts, they all got together, like all the crews got together and got me like an outfit. So I ended up like wearing this one guy's pants, like his jeans, and, and I had like this great big shirt on that I tied up. It was great. It was a lot of fun. But so that day I walked in being one role and then I had to switch to another role like immediately within like an hour of being at work. So it was pretty funny. So so it's always really good. And then at the end of the day, I would take over other positions, right? Like, so I'd show up and I would work a few extra hours doing some other things. So my roles kind of switched around all day. And then some days I would show up and I'd be ready to work in the office and they would send me out to do like a couple measurements. Well, now I'm my own crew chief at that point. I'm not even working with anyone in the field at that. So there's that possibility that you have to be super flexible with it and be flexible with those expectations, right? So after that first experience there that I was telling you about, I made sure I always had field clothes in my vehicle from then on. I didn't feel like borrowing anybody's clothes after that. But anyway, so like I say in this class, you will be or have been put in small groups. You will be the leader for some, and some you'll be more of a worker. The reason for that is just maybe naturally you fall into that position because of the energy within that group. So you always find that you work differently with people. Like, have you ever noticed that you talk and deal with maybe your parents or your guardians in a different way than what you would deal with your like nieces and nephews versus how you treat an instructor versus how you treat your friends versus how you treat your girlfriend or boyfriend, all of or partner of any sort. So all of that, like every single situation you're in, you're different. So it depends on the people that you're with, and it's really just that energy dynamic that will put you in different roles. So you are going to find that you're more comfortable in some roles than others. Sometimes you'll see people that just fall into a leader role. They just like easily just, hey, I'm going to start this out. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Okay, well, I think this is a reasonable timeline, and they're really good at that, and they're really comfortable with doing it. But then there's sometimes you may find your strengths are in certain roles when dealing with different people. So you may find that you walk into this group and you're like, you know what, I am really good at drafting and that's all I want to do. And that's my boundaries. I'm going to do the drafting for this group. And then, but then you start talking to somebody and that person's like, I'm having real problems with this calculation. Can you help me? And then you go over to that person in your group and you're like, hey, yeah, I totally know that. Well, now you've gone from being the drafter to being the teacher, right? So so that's just something to keep in mind when you're working with your different roles. So I know we're getting up to 20 minutes here. So I'm going to do 10.3 and then I'll stop and we'll go on to a new video after this. So 10.3 is managing a group meeting. And so here's group meetings. Welcome to group meetings. Welcome to the world of any kind of industry that is running around doing anything. You end up in meetings. Now, I actually took a course on meetings, believe it or not. And you know what they teach? They teach that only meet if you absolutely have to. And corporations really haven't figured that out yet. So I'm going to warn you about that now. They haven't figured out that if you're going into a meeting and all it is just to make announcements, that's actually very counterproductive. So, and I tell you that hasn't changed. Like there's so many, and like even though they're teaching this in these courses, in like management courses, it's weird that they still continue. But sometimes you have to meet. Sometimes you have to meet in person, and sometimes that just like provides a different kind of environment when you're actually meeting in person. So when you have a meeting, you should always have an agenda and set a time frame. So why do you do that? Because if you have an agenda, you know exactly what your goal is to accomplish in that meeting. There's nothing worse than showing up to a meeting and having no idea what you're supposed to be covering, and then you end up like totally off topic, and then you leave the meeting and you have covered absolutely nothing. That is that is so counterproductive, like because you end up just sitting there chatting and talking about the coffee that was in the staff room, and you end up like saying, hey, what'd you do last night, and has nothing to do with work. So a group meeting should always be very like, especially if it's a formal group meeting, like we are going to meet and discuss this. That is what's important. That's that agenda, and have a set time frame. Meetings that go on and on and on and on are brutal. They suck. So don't let meetings run on. So yeah, like I say in the second point, one of the greatest faults in industry is having a meeting for the sake of having a meeting. We are going to have weekly meetings at 8 a.m. on Mondays. Why? Why do we need to have the meeting at 8 a.m. every Monday? Is it a safety talk? Maybe that's really important. Is it, and that's all it is. It's like a 5 minute meeting and you're doing that. But scheduling like a 2 hour meeting, 8 till 10 on Monday mornings, and every time you go in there, it's like, okay, well, just remember this is due coming up, and just remember this is coming up, and just remember this is coming up, and don't forget to get this in before the deadline. And how's everybody doing? Okay, good. That's the end of the meeting. That is so counterproductive. So, so don't just have if you are running it, just don't just have meetings for the sake of it, because as much as people enjoy meeting up and chatting with everyone else and telling them what they're doing, it doesn't contribute to earning money, right? And that's just kind of the nature of corporations. So your meeting needs to show it has a purpose, requires a discussion and input, and will be more effective as a meeting rather than an email or a quick phone call, right? So there, the discussion component of a meeting is the most important. Brainstorming, coming up with new ideas, talking with each other about certain situations, that is a productive meeting. So instead of, like I said, that example where it's like, hey, don't forget, don't forget, don't forget, and then how's everyone doing? That really doesn't have a purpose other than like update. and but it doesn't have discussion and input. So make sure that your meetings with your groups at school here, that you don't just meet up to say, how you doing? Yeah, check, 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 done. Make sure there's some discussion. How should we do this? How should we approach this? What do you think about this? Who do we think we should contact about this? So that is, and then brainstorm that way. So that's why you want your meetings. So your leader in a group needs to keep everyone on topic to avoid going overtime. Respecting everyone's time is really important. So always do that. And then if you need extra time, stop the meeting and book another time. Okay, so I know that it's really easy, especially in school. You're like, you know what, we can just keep going. We'll just keep working on this. We'll just keep going. We'll just keep going. If you said, you know what, we're gonna have a half-hour meeting, keep it to a half hour. If you need more time, say, can we rebook this? You need to give that break at that time because everyone's mental capacity has already limited themselves to that half hour, and so you don't want to run overtime and then all of a sudden, everybody is like, oh, okay, well, my brain is shut down at the half hour mark. Unless it's like 2 minutes over, then it's okay. But you don't want to do that. But anyways, so that's group meeting. So I will get into Objective 10.4 in the next video, and we will continue on talking about roles.